This video is sponsored by Babbel.
It's August, so you know what that means. I have to prepare for tax season. There's so many adventures to be had and learning to anticipate, and luckily Babbel checks both boxes. If you don't know what Babbel is, it is a language learning app that teaches you real-world practical conversations in your target language. My target language has been Spanish since the end of last year, and estoy fracasando muy bien, but I'm also annoying. I wanted to try French as well because there's actually a decent amount of French references in this video. Babbel offers 10-minute interactive lessons that are designed by real language teachers, meaning no AI or machine learning algorithms. What's more is the fact that Babbel sort of transcends traditional learning, which, if you're a fan of video essays, you'll know is a great way to retain information. They provide educational podcasts, games, videos, and live classes with top teachers. If you want to brush up on your language learning skills for that last great summer adventure, or if you want to get ahead of your studies this fall, Babbel just may be what you're looking for. You can click the link in my description to get 65% off, or just scan the QR code on screen. Thank you to Babbel for sponsoring this video.
I am so convinced by this new form's advantages that I, Eric Faden, hereby renounce my earthly, traditional, literary-bound scholarly practices. I vow to abstain from that most sacred, but restricted of intellectual practices, the literary academic essay, no matter the temptation. From here forward, I put my faith in media over text, screen over paper. Thus, this is the last essay I will ever write. Envisage, if you will, the video essay genre, those educational blights, stains, if you will, upon the traditional academic scene. Sorry, I meant subversive critics utilizing traditional academic frameworks in order to commentate on popular culture. The ink is smudging on my hand, it's getting kind of hard to read. Old heads may think of Nerd Writer or Every Frame a Painting when I say video essay. Slightly less old heads may think of ContraPoints or Lindsay Ellis. Infants might recall the likes of T Noir or FD Signifier. The video essay is witty. It's educational. It's a place where like-minded individuals gather to discuss politics or media. It seems innocent enough, this genre, so modest in its pondering, so easily accessible on the hell site that is known as youtube.com. People like it. I mean, people think it's a... What is that group of people doing with Shakespeare in the town square? Is that a ghillie... The video essay genre has found itself in the middle of a renaissance. Some may call it a oversaturation of content. I am calling it a renaissance. And this new era of the critic has ushered in some critics of its own. The frothy, dense cup that is twitter.com isn't quite astir as we speak.
Can we please let these 40-minute long YouTube video essays die? For the love of God.
If you actually watch video essays, you have convinced me that you are incapable of forming your own opinion.
I'm so tired of these YouTube essayists. You are 16. 9 times out of 10, these videos are just redundant, nonsensical rambles. Like speaking just to speak.
It's pseudo-intellectualism, the needless desire to take apart and critique every notion and idea in existence. Some things are better left uncontaminated by academic discourse.
As a society, we need more teachers, doctors, engineers, architects, firefighters, lawyers, and other service caterers. Not woke 20-year-old essayists who do nothing but make life more of a misery.
You know what? Get the guillotine. Get the guillotine.
I must say this quickly. Video essays are in danger. We must trace back to the beginning, figure out where we went wrong, where we went right. They're coming. Just please reassure me that you will...
While that was a bit dramatic, Cherie Antoinette was right. We must trace through the different eras of the video essay, pinpoint the sudden influx of content, and figure out what the hell is going on. Well, we don't have to, but this is my channel and I get to choose the annoyingly pretentious video topics that have no tangible impact on the real world. Damn. The era of the video essay starts with what Philippe Lapote calls the ever-elusive centaur, the jarring hybrid of traditional essay and introspective film. We will call this centaur the essay film. They weren't very creative in the 1940s, except when they did all this, but that doesn't count. To discuss this early genre, we must make some arrangements. I, for one, need to be off-screen, replaced instead by my disembodied voice and the juddering celluloid of whichever film I wish to dissect. Though it's not necessarily a requirement, it does seem to be a frequently utilized style in the genre, most likely influenced by Chris Marker's work, the golden child of the essay film genre. The end result of this style looks like a film itself, which isn't by accident. As Every Frame a Painting said,
remember, video essays aren't essays. They're films.
More importantly, they are films that interrogate themselves, utilizing a pleasing dichotomy of image and voice. As much as the genre depends upon these filmic techniques, the essay film would be impossible without the advent of the traditional essay. The term essay has roots in the 1590s, most notably popularized by Michel de Montaigne. God damn, he has a forehead on him. My God. Sorry, that he kind of reminds me of someone else we know. Montaigne, a French philosopher during the Renaissance, called these works essays, attempts, trials. The French influence of the term itself derives from the Latin verb exigere, which means to examine, test, or to literally drive out. One could argue then that the purpose of the traditional essay is to examine, to pose a question by holding a topic up to the world. The end goal is not necessarily an answer, it's the journey, or the attempt, the interrogation itself, that's important to the essay. But how do we know what to ask, what to interrogate, without first observing? It's the very essence of video essays, quite possibly what makes them so poignant. Video, from the Latin verb videre, meaning to see. Essay, meaning to ask. You can't have one without the other. Yelizaveta Moss, author of Essay Film, notes that the first use of the phrase stems from Hans Richter in the 1940s. The first person ever considered to bridge the gap between the traditional essay and the analysis of film using filmic techniques was André Bazin in 1958. And from there, the genre sort of snowballed, adding notable titles like Chris Marker's Letter from Siberia and Sans Soleil. By 1992, the lake was pretty dry. Philippe Lapote questioned the lifespan of that centaur, that half essay, half film, and wondered if the very best of the genre was behind us. The essay film, like most things considered high in artistic value, is quite exclusive. The guidelines for being able to consider yourself an essayistic film creator are very selective, far different from the guidelines of today. You can't just write an essay and perform it on camera. You can't just ask these ruminative questions about any given media and slap a supercut over it.
You must start with a mental knot, however various its strands.
And you must, for the love of God, have some swagger in the undoing of this knot.
It is not enough for the essayist to slay the bull. It must be done with more finesse than butchery. Freshness, honesty, self-exposure, authority must all be asserted in turn.
It must contain words, either spoken or visual. This is what sets the essay film apart from the likes of political posters or image-based ads. And since words are integral, voice and perspective have to be considered too. Think of the importance of a clear writer's voice. It acts as an unmistakable signature, even when we're writing from various viewpoints. In other words, you must create a singular voice haunted by that same mental knot. All of the intertwining threads possibly belong to different perspectives, but they're tied in the same knot regardless. In that voice, it has to be wistful, purposeful. You have to know the significance of oration, of seducing your viewer with the flow of your sentences, the flowers of your words. Above all, the essay film needs a thesis, a probing question that needs to be asked, not necessarily answered, but asked. This is where the traditional essay and the essay film branch off. Eric S. Faden argues that the traditional essay seeks to be exhaustive. It is argumentative, structured by its thesis, supplemented by its evidence, and rounded out by its conclusion. Traditional scholarship aspires to exhaustion,
to be the definitive end-all be-all last word on a particular subject. But not the video essay. The video essay suggests possibilities. It is not the end of scholarly inquiry. It is the beginning. It explores and experiments and is designed just as much to inspire as to convince. So you get masterful yet introspective work like that of Lindsay Ellis, Every Frame a Painting, Yara Zaid and Broe Deschanel, Anti-Heroines, Film Fatales, Be Kind Rewind, Friendly Space Ninja, Princess Weeks. The list goes on. In fact, it never stops. You get questions like, how does an editor think and feel? Or Gossip Girl 2021, what the hell happened? And you get answers, surely. But I would argue that because the answers of an essay are inherently subjective, they aren't the most important part. It's the process. If we wanted a quick answer on a silver platter, sans journey, we just type it into our search engine. This labyrinth, this mental knot, these are the foundations of what we've come to know as the modern video essay. And it is here where we begin our journey of faults.
Essays are popular because they're figuratively art, literally meant to inform, and blatantly meant to entertain. I mean, look, I'm a black guy with pink hair and a talking whale. Come on, this is like a better version of Johnny Test, but the whip cracks were like 3 generations ago. The art is evident in the diversity of topics that can be covered, the depth of nuance that can be given, and the level of ingenuity that can be utilized in this format, all packaged in an aesthetic little bow unique to the YouTuber, mind you. What I find riveting, however, is how video essays teach their viewers. Like I said, every video essayist paints a different picture or message, be it through the way the creator edits their videos, designs their background scenery, utilizes themselves as a reflection of their topics, or even the intricacies pertaining to the verbal concoction of a cornucopia of words, which interlopes into the brain of the viewer and produces dopamine.
I'm in my contra bag, contrasphere, Shan points. Okay, so I was being a little bit dramatic at the end of the previous section. The essay film certainly has its own setbacks. They were a little inaccessible at their height and were primarily made for limited theatrical release in select cities. Or they were presented to film festivals, museums, or film societies. And what plebeian has access to that? Some may even argue that they were kind of pretentious, what with the exhaustive list of requirements and the grandiloquent language used to describe them. But the succeeding era of the essay film sort of turned those flaws on their head. breadtube has murky origins, but what we do know is that it existed as a left-wing countergenre against the alarming rise of alt-right content on social media. It presented left-wing ideas to millions of viewers and primarily referenced other left-wing creators or left-wing sources so that even the most oppositional viewer could fall down a rabbit hole. Enter stage left, de-radicalization, and exit stage right again because that's all you need to know about that. Instead of presenting their work through voiceover, some breadtubers prioritized elaborate sets, props, and costumes. And instead of depending on supercuts, they leaned into lush editing and theatrical performances. At the center of it all was that inherent question format so significant to the traditional essay. By now, you may be wondering why I'm speaking about this genre like a fallen soldier, when really it's still considered operational. I'm using past tense not because these creators no longer exist or because the genre is entirely defunct, but because I think we're moving quite quickly out of this era and into a new one. More on that later. breadtube took on an important job at its height, one that quite possibly altered the landscape of video essays forever. A lot of breadtube creators started either as a way to make education more accessible, like PhilosophyTube, or as a way to counter dangerous rhetoric articulated by the alt-right. And they did all of this in a way that was digestible and fun. You don't necessarily need a degree in film theory or academia to appreciate the messages of these videos, and that's what makes them so popular in our contemporary age.
I'm convinced that the video essay is a medium for like content consumption that is born out of a highly intelligent, highly curious population that has never really been fed like the video essay feeds. It's a stimulating, to some people, it's a stimulating medium. If you're doing your essays a certain way. Not everybody's gonna do an essay that's incredibly stimulating, you know what I'm saying? But like your essays, my essays, again, CJ, Foreign, a lot of people, intellectual media, like these are visually impressive pieces of content that are providing a lot of information that makes it engaging and easier to keep up. And then if you can't keep up, you can pause it.
Yeah.
And there's no consequence for that. You can come back to it another day. So it's really just built for, you know, a generation with maybe a shorter attention span, or just like has to fit in learning about this new thing in a work commute or in a lunch break. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to, I have class from 1 to 2 p.m., which everybody can't do, you know?
So one thing I like to say is that I like to make humanities cool, because I mean, you've been through academia as well, and like you go through the seminars that aren't always like super interesting. So like the goal with YouTube, with video essays, is to make them fun, to make them cool, to make them entertaining. On the idea of video essays like becoming almost better than academia, or like more accessible and attracting so many people. And something you said that was quite clear is just the fact that we are young, we talk like young people, and come from backgrounds as well that aren't too elitist. The teachers I liked the most at uni were the ones that came from similar backgrounds as well, because they had that language. They didn't talk with like crazy concepts, etc. So these are the ones that I could relate to the most. And so the relatability is so important with video essays, and I think that's why they work so much.
The way information is presented, simplified, and delved into makes this form of learning ideal for a variety of people, especially people who are not well versed with certain topics being discussed. Unlike university, where you'll probably need a couple prior mandatory classes in order to enroll and understand the more advanced topics in their entirety. In a video essay, all topics are dissected and explained in the said video being presented. And if not, the video wouldn't be pushed. The algorithm would send the video into the shadow realm, and the YouTuber would get 0 maidens. This post is sponsored by dropping out and learning all your information from a pink-haired dude on YouTube.
I think it definitely is more accessible, and it's definitely a way of like democratizing academia, because you don't have to pay like thousands to be in a classroom to have these conversations. You don't have to go anywhere to have these conversations. You can just like be in the comfort of your own home and not only like learn about different topics, but also like speak about them and like contribute in a way to the conversation. So it's just like breaking down all the kind of the barriers between the like access, I guess. But also I think it makes the material a lot more accessible, because if you read like an academic paper or even a textbook, they can have like all these different like theories. Like I don't know every one of like Freud's theories off by heart. I like barely know who like Foucault is, and if you start referencing like his Panopticon, I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna tap out at some point. And I think video essays in general are very good about like introducing a concept and explaining it in very like easy language, kind of just like simplifying it to the bare bones, like without all the like flowery language.
All right, enough throwing petals. I'm gonna start on the tomatoes now. BreadTube was wider than a tube of Wonder Bread. Not because people of color didn't watch or create that sort of content, but because they were largely ignored or shunned by white viewers. Creators don't decide if they're BreadTube or not, at least not back in Yale Wonder Bread years. The viewers decided. And the viewers had a habit of separating the coloreds from the whites, like they're doing laundry and would be terrified if their favorite white tennis skirt got ruined because a stray black YouTuber somehow snuck into the rinse cycle. It's important to note that this division wasn't exactly welcomed by the actual creators, who were shoved under the label. Creators like ContraPoints have outright employed her audience to drop the BreadTube label, and a creator by the name of Sean says that BreadTube is a fake group with arbitrary subjective membership. While BreadTube may not work in theory, it certainly does work for the purpose of this video, because analyzing where the community went wrong is important to understanding the future of the video essay genre. The most notable works on the subject of BreadTube's exclusivity include Cat Black's Why Is Left Tube So White and FD Signifier's Break Bread. Both of these videos examine what it means to be a black political creator on a platform that works hard to serve the interest of its white consumers. Hold on that, because I know you guys don't like generalizations. I'm not saying that YouTube is actively and exclusively catering to white audiences. As a brand, I think they'll really just do whatever makes them the most money, and that means marketing towards, more than one social group. The thing about essay writing is that you're in the business of making definitive statements in relation to your point. So for me, that's the analysis of white audiences, specifically in relation to the algorithm, not anyone else. But that is just the beginning of the conversation. There are many more sides to it. FD's video features an excellent investigation into the algorithmic preferences held by white viewers that lead to creators of color either being pushed to the sidelines, tokenized, or made invisible altogether. I would argue, as FD does, that implicit bias is one of the many aspects at play in this suppression. White viewers, for a multitude of reasons, have a preference for consuming content made by other white people, especially political content that discusses subjects long since covered by marginalized activists. These consumers aren't racist, at least not overtly so. In fact, they may not even realize they have this preference in the first place. Darren L. Hutchinson defines implicit bias as covert attitudes and implicit stereotypes that function outside conscious attentional focus. These attitudes and implicit stereotypes are often weaponized against people outside of your in-group, to the point where you're more likely to mistreat or avoid them based on these beliefs alone. The reason it's called implicit bias rather than just literal actual racism is because you don't realize that you believe these things. They're so ingrained in your belief system that they seem invisible. You may lock your door whenever you see a black person approaching your car, or you may clutch your purse closer to your body whenever a colored skirt gets too close to the washing machine. But the same person who does these things is the same person who has Black Lives Matter in their bio. They may even genuinely believe in the equality of all beings. Implicit bias is important to the algorithm because it informs how you consume content. As Hutchinson states, non-conscious stereotypes or shortcuts embedded in the human mind cause the individual to evaluate members of different social groups in a disparate manner. You're more likely to watch people you connect with on some basis, right? That's what our comfort zone implores us to do, and I find that to be very normal. But when we begin challenging our comfort zone, something interesting may occur. The fear center in our brain may actually see a spike in activity when we're faced with someone outside of our in-group. This could occur for a multitude of reasons, but one pertinent argument is that we react with fear because we implicitly believe disparaging stereotypes about other social groups. These stereotypes stem from the prevalent rhetoric surrounding marginalized identities, like the angry black woman or the criminal black man. In terms of video essays, rhetoric surrounding black people's intelligence or ability to articulate complex thoughts may give you pause if you see a black person in an educational sphere. Not only would you probably be like, oh god, my washing machine, you may also covertly believe that a black creator isn't credible, intelligent, or elite enough to teach you anything a white creator can. Subsequently, black creators who would have fit into the breadtube label once upon a time are ushered out and pushed to the sidelines. ContraPoints mentions this in a 2021 tweet where she notes the hypocrisy of white audiences who deem her as an integral part of breadtube while shunning someone like Kat Black or Khadija Mbo or any one of us for that matter who produce similar political content. The thing about implicit bias that I believe some white consumers may try to ignore is that it's not just the mark of a racist sinner. Anyone can harbor these ideas for a multitude of social groups, and it takes a lot of real uncomfortable work to undo these biases. One solution people may suggest about the racial aspect is to add some marginalized voices to your Rolodex, right? White consumers just need to be introduced to more creators of color and expand their minds with first-hand accounts of the politics that they so cherish. After all, a study conducted by Harvard emphasizes the importance of diversity in education, as it is considered, quote, essential to advancing knowledge broadly and to pursuing ideals of justice in ways that recognize and include the experiences, aspirations, and needs of an even more diverse world. I mean, that does sound revolutionary. It might even cause a renaissance. Ah, okay. Fuck. Let's go back a little bit. Start at the beginning. This is so hard. In my CJ the X era, X Spear, No, that doesn't sound right. In this modern era, we've shed all of the pretentiousness of essay films and all of the complex sets and budgets of breadtube. For the most part, we've settled comfortably into a diverse, well-oiled machine that sings harmoniously in the daylight. No, don't listen to those screams. We fixed it. We fixed it. This is the best video essay era ever. Stop yelling. Okay, so we didn't fix it, but a lot has changed. We're no longer show-offs, for lack of a better word. We sit in our living room, on our floor, in front of our green walls, or even in our bed when we're feeling under the weather. This new era seems to prioritize conversational and vulnerable presentations over melodrama. And I would argue that the conversation has become more robust over time. We have creators like Haryana Hook, St. Andrew, Foreign Man, Fab Socialism, Tirrrb, Victory the Creator, Zariah Smith, Mo Black, Olisunvia, Cheyenne Lynn, Alice Cappelle, there's Mina Lay, Tara Mooney, CJ the X, Madison Brown, Jessie Gender, Black Femininity TV, the list goes on and on. My mouth is getting kind of dry. And we have come together to form a very poetic picture of progress, education, and hellfire screams. You know what the deal is. If we argue that the problem with breadtube was that it lacked diversity due to its implicit bias or outright racism, we will be hard pressed to figure out why the current era is still like that. The video essay genre that I experienced as a newcomer, long after breadtube's rise and fall, is still missing the mark on its relationship to marginalized creators. Black creators are still being violently dragged and relentlessly targeted on platforms like Twitch and Twitter by other left-leaning creators and their presumably left-leaning audiences. Sometimes for things that I'm not gonna get into it. I'm not. I've seen creators of color routinely age restricted or demonetized for speaking about racial politics, and there's still a form of elitism present in the community, oftentimes from well-meaning viewers. So to clarify and better contextualize the rest of the video, I get a lot of comments about the way I speak, whether that be on the rare occasion I use AAVE or when I happen to mispronounce a word. I've talked about this a lot in my linguistic discrimination video, but I have a unique upbringing that affects the way I talk. I was a first-generation college graduate. My mom was the first of her siblings to get a diploma. My dad was an immigrant and he has a very thick accent. I was born, raised, and currently reside in the South, which has its own way of pronunciation and speech patterns based on wherever you reside. I was also surrounded a lot by AAVE growing up, not in the trendy TikTok fashion that people love to co-opt, but in the consonant cluster reduction, habitual B, and embracing of double negatives sort of way. Furthermore, a lot of my standardized vocabulary was learned through books. I've never really heard them spoken out loud, and so all of that adds up to me pronouncing things in a way that to some viewers comes off as uneducated or unworthy of being listened to, which is bullshit. I've been infamously told that my arguments would be more credible if I spoke correctly. I've been told that I need to learn how to speak correctly before I make videos. There's also just been an interesting aversion to the very little AAVE that I do happen to speak in my videos. Although I code switch for this very reason, there are some aspects of the dialect that I can't just shake off when the camera turns on. This becomes most evident in the way I pronounce the word ask, like axe, and how the last letter of words tend to drop off for me sometimes. And this treatment is so constant that it's led to a sort of speech anxiety around certain words. When I just can't get a word right, or when I'm editing and I notice that I said a word kind of weird, I fixate on it and I berate myself for it the same way my comments do. This treatment is not making me smarter, it's not making me any more accepted, it's not making me have a passion for the English language. It's just hurting me. Despite the issue of breadtube being solved, i.e. diversity being taken seriously, the problems associated with that issue don't seem to be going away. And that's because we're not addressing the issue at the root. As Angela Davis said,
usual conceptualization simply asks how to achieve diversity and inclusion without attending to the transformations that would also help to achieve justice and set us on a path toward the democracy to come. Mere assimilation is our enemy. seducing us to participate in apparatuses that more effectively carry out the business of suppressing change. What we need, I think, is radical transformation.
Diversity without total transformation of systems that exclude or suppress marginalized voices is diversity without intent of advancement. And what I mean by that, and what Davis means, since I just paraphrased one of her quotes, is that the problems of breadtube still exist because it wasn't breadtube that was the problem. It's systemic. After watching FD Signifiers break bread, I wondered what would be the next step after viewers adjusted their algorithmic preferences, after they allowed marginalized voices to take up space within their conversations. What happens, for instance, when we introduce Black creators into a community that still implicitly or explicitly undervalues us, still finds us uncredible or unintelligent compared to their white faves? Well, look no further. We already see the answer in our classrooms, our universities, dare I even say in our Supreme Court confirmation hearings.
Do you agree with this book that is being taught with kids that babies are racist?
Senator,
If we think back to early predecessors of the video essay genre, i.e. essay films and traditional academia, we see that same level of exclusion that is perpetuated in breadtube. And that is because we're continuing to introduce diversity into structures that seek no real advancement. Therefore, the conversation should be less about diversity and more about challenging implicit bias and perpetuations of elitism that further excludes marginalized voices. In layman's terms, elitism refers to a sort of hierarchy where we believe people at the top should be given more authority and merit over people at the bottom. Historically, that hierarchy has looked a little like this. The wealthy, cultured, educated, and cis, often men, dominated at the top, while everyone else were crushed beneath the weight of their perfection. The education system looks rather similar, at least behind the curtains. Eric J. Siegel and Adam Feldman are the authors of The Elite Teaching the Elite, Who Gets Hired by the Top Law Schools. And in this study, they look at the graduate institution of various law professors to determine hiring patterns of the top 10 US law schools. They found that law students were more likely to be hired by a top 10 law school if they graduated from one, while people outside of top 10 schools had a significantly lower chance. At the time of the study, Harvard and Yale had 152 tenure track or tenured faculty who obtained their degrees in the United States. And of those 152 faculty members, 149 of them graduated from a top 10 school. That's 95%. The same pattern can be found in Stanford, Chicago, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Siegel and Feldman consider this a sort of academic inbreeding, where a cycle occurs of elites teaching the elites, who will then teach more elites. In terms of race, the picture is quite similar. When considering applicants who have the same academic profile, sans race, quote, whites consistently have the greatest chance of being accepted by the universities over their peers of color. Elitism, that ever-present hierarchy that we form our spaces of education by, has more of an effect than just hurt feelings. The hierarchy implies that only certain traits are valued in a person. These traits may be wealth or connection in regard to the law school study, or it can be something as simple as race. These traits are the most precious, most significant indicators of prosperity in our lives, and as such, everyone is measured against these traits in order to determine their value. In a response to the question of elitism open and shut, Bennett Reimer utilizes the imagery of a scale to contextualize this form of elitist thinking. In short, the girls are fighting. In Long, Reimer argues that although Ralph Smith tries to avoid sounding elitist in his 1987 article, The Question of Elitism, he misses the mark.
The best he can manage is the argument that everyone should have the opportunity to be elitist. What it means is that everyone should be encouraged to value what he and the community he represents values.
This is evident in the way Smith talks about art, what makes it art in the first place, and who gets to determine that. The scale, in turn, represents this elitist thinking.
Anything called art must be judged in value on a single scale.
The problem with the scale theory, at least in how it's weaponized against the non-elite, is that it's not nuanced enough to handle the vast diversity of our world. I'm surrounded by all white, right now. And while it's excellent in the metaphorical sense,
I need the paper.
It's a metaphor!
it also lacks depth. It lacks contrast. Maybe the petals in the water could be gold or red. Maybe they can actually stop sinking to the bottom and float to the top for one. The diversity necessary for the function of a nuanced society is stamped out by the scale and renders the society unsustainable, at least for all those poor red petals that didn't get a chance. I would argue that we're still using this exclusionary scale when we consume the content of marginalized creators. And if we're being honest, maybe we're using it for every video essay ever, since we apparently think they're flaming piles of garbage shitting on the perfect fabric of traditional academia.
In the same vein of like accessibility and this sort of new model of education, a lot of people think that video essays are like lowbrow in a way. They think that we're not academic enough. And I'm not even like talking about like commenters. I'm talking about sort of scholars who posit that video essays are not worthy of the sort of academic label.
Yeah, it's something I definitely hear. I remember when I started talking about the fact that I had a channel, I was still finishing my master's degree, and I saw two different type of reactions. My tutor was very supportive. He was like, "Oh, that's cool," and he actually learned a bit more about like this whole genre of video essays and stuff like that. So I was very happy about it, and I think like I was expecting that everyone would be like that, but actually no. Like most teachers were kind of skeptical. It's like, what is this thing, YouTube? Like, that's for kids. That's something I hear all the time. Like, whenever I talk about YouTube to people, it's like, oh, you're doing videos for kids. And it's like, no, it's not just for kids.
I feel like you could also, if you're going by that logic, you could just discredit any like review, like any like film review, critical review, and just be like, well, this is just their opinion. It's like, why, first of all, why does that invalidate anything?
Yeah, literally.
And also, I feel like by saying it's not like academic enough is very just like classist and elitist. And I think like people don't recognize the difference between academic and intelligent, and like you can be intelligent and have well-formed opinions and like articulate them without having a college degree, without having a high school degree, you know what I mean? And like they're not synonymous.
And there's a discourse again around the elitism of what it takes to make, understand, and consume video essays. And like, I hate to say it, the motherfuckers in the back of the classroom calling you a nerd, like that's
yeah, like just let me chat my shit and just let me like say what I think.
If someone is following the structure of a traditional essay, if they're including sources and clear arguments, that makes their video what? A video essay. There's no need to condescendingly put quotations around it or, God forbid, call it a gussied up opinion. What makes something an essay, just like what makes something art, is not solely dependent on you, the dissertation dictator, the argument auditor, the paper protector. I often feel like I am placed on this incongruent scale where both my intelligence and credibility are measured, oftentimes in a mocking or outright rude way. I get excluded from the gentleman's club because I sometimes use a different dialect. I lose a degree of humanity when I mispronounce something. It reminds me a lot of my traditional school experience, of Black students being mocked by teachers for the way they pronounce things, of being constantly corrected when we didn't use standardized English, even when our sentences were clear and comprehensible. Traditional academia gets a lot of shit for how inaccessible it is, for a multitude of reasons. And it turns out that the very structures we've built to progress our society, i.e. education, have often stunted us instead.
Academia is trash. And I say this as a person who is a dissertation away from a PhD, right? Who has three degrees, you know, I'm ABD, and I quit. And I had a really supportive, I feel bad because I haven't said this enough. I had a pretty supportive team at my grad school, but just to me, the nature of academia, I realized pretty early on I was uninterested in because it is elitist. It's, what is it? Gatekeep girl boss ratio. Whatever it is.
The same goes for the video essay community. I think we're still perpetuating the dichotomous discourse surrounding traditional academia. Either something isn't good enough in social media's eyes to be considered academic, or it's too academic and it taints whatever it touches. I understand the latter in the sense that academia hasn't been kind to everyone, and some people genuinely feel contempt for the institutions that they feel held them back. Reimer is valid in stating that
the contempt some people hold for high art is not of the art, it is of the attitude of those elitists who, overtly or covertly, express that those who don't share those elitist values are to be sneered at worst, or educated out of their ignorance at best.
As someone who went through the traditional education system, I can understand the anxiety surrounding academic discourse and how that may translate to the treatment of video essays. The mocking, the overcorrection, the lack of space for creativity and marginalized voices seems counterproductive to a community that claims to prioritize learning like we do. If we approach this new realm of education the same way traditional academia has, we're just creating an environment that is just as unsustainable to the growth and grace of others. If we were to adjust the scale to include different experiences, different dialects that have their own grammar system, by the way, different academic upbringings, different ways in which people learn or speak or look, we will be able to get past such arbitrary bullshit and focus on what actually matters. As Evan Jogia, actor extraordinaire, king of being a TV character dating a goth girl, author of words and general Instagram poeticness, once said, "We are constantly policing semantics instead of feeling and experiencing the value of a work, and creating, for ourselves, an opinion based on the content of something." End quote. We're so busy trying to feel smart that we don't let information permeate. We don't even give authentic conversations a chance. There's many different paths to take towards a more robust community full of discourse and growth and grace. I can't speak for everyone, but the point of my video essays isn't to make you feel smarter than everyone else. It's not so you can feel confident or more intelligent through way of mocking or microaggressions. If you want that, just go watch... Never mind. I think education is very personal. If you're not examining yourself or at least critically engaging with the content you're consuming, you're wasting a large portion of the knowledge that you're learning. Video essays are here to prepare, to attempt, to trace the beginning of a conversation, not the ending. And in order for them to be able to do that, we have to loosen up the reins a bit. Unclench, for God's sake. Beyond that, I'm only asking for you to be critical in your engagement and always lean towards teachability. If you want to see my annotated sources and personal notes for this video, you can head over to my Patreon, linked in the description. Bye, it's been a pleasure. I love you. Good night. I have to pee so bad.